It is exactly 8:45 p.m. on a highly depressing, completely miserable Friday evening. The entire office is completely pitch black, except for the harsh, deeply offensive glow of your dual monitors actively reflecting off your exhausted, intensely pale face. You are sitting completely alone in the vastly empty, highly terrifying cubicle farm, listening to the deeply unsettling hum of the building's massive heating and cooling system. You are quietly eating an incredibly sad, desperately cold container of takeout noodles that you aggressively ordered 4 hours ago. But you are doing it for a highly noble reason. You are pushing through the profound loneliness and the absolutely terrifying silence because you are a phenomenal team player. You are incredibly dedicated to the overarching, highly synergistic vision of this deeply mediocre mid-level corporate machine. Stop right there. Take a very deep, extremely shaky breath, violently close your deeply fatigued eyes, and thoroughly accept the absolute tragic, highly undeniable reality of your incredibly miserable situation. You are absolutely not a cherished, highly valued asset to this massive company. You are simply the invisible employee, the desperate, chronically overworked, entirely unappreciated pack mule who is endlessly pulling a massively heavy wagon full of pure corporate incompetence, slowly marching toward an absolute psychological and physical collapse. Let us have a very quiet, thoroughly depressing, and completely honest conversation about the ultimate, heartbreaking lie of the modern corporate meritocracy. Since the very first day of kindergarten, human society has forcefully fed you a massive, completely fabricated, beautifully decorated fairy tale. They actively told you that if you strictly keep your head down, if you work incredibly hard, and if you flawlessly follow all of the arbitrary, deeply pointless rules, you will absolutely be noticed and handsomely rewarded by the benevolent authorities in charge. What an absolutely magnificent, spectacularly cruel deception that turned out to be. In the actual, deeply toxic, remarkably chaotic reality of the modern workplace, simply keeping your head down and working incredibly hard absolutely does not get you a massive promotion. It does not get you a highly lucrative raise. It does not even confidently get you a moderately respectful, highly basic nod in the violently fluorescent lit hallway. It simply gets you exponentially more work. It permanently turns you into the department's highly reliable, entirely invisible dumping ground for every single horrible, highly complicated, desperately boring task that absolutely no one else in the entire building wants to aggressively touch. You actively become the absolute worst, most tragic thing a fragile human being can possibly be in a highly competitive corporate environment. You become fundamentally reliable. Let us vividly and intensely break down the exact, highly tragic anatomy of your deeply invisible existence. You are the ultimate, fiercely dependable human safety net. When a highly urgent, massively disastrous, completely avoidable crisis erupts at exactly 4:59 p.m. on a completely miserable Thursday afternoon, you are the exact person who magically fixes it. When a terribly formatted, completely incomprehensible, heavily corrupted spreadsheet needs to be absolutely flawless for a major executive client presentation the very next morning, you are the intensely exhausted individual who spends 6 agonizing, deeply terrifying hours violently untangling the heavily ruined data. And what exactly does this massive, highly impressive level of dedication ultimately cost you? Everything. It literally costs you your entire personal life. You have actively missed countless milestone birthday dinners. You have violently canceled long-anticipated, deeply expensive weekend vacation plans, and you have entirely forgotten what the actual warmth of the sun physically feels like on your intensely pale skin. You pour your absolute entire, highly fragile soul into every single mundane, totally pointless project. You meticulously double-check every single PDF document. You flawlessly organize the deeply chaotic shared network drive, and you willingly sacrifice your precious, highly sensitive nervous system directly on the cold, unforgiving altar of corporate excellence. And you do it all because you genuinely, deeply believe that one glorious day, the massive, highly powerful, totally untouchable corporate entities in upper management will simply look down from their completely isolated, beautifully decorated mahogany desks and say, "Wow, look at this incredibly dedicated, highly spectacular, completely selfless employee. We must promote them immediately. We must shower them with vast amounts of corporate wealth and absolute prestige." But then, we aggressively have to talk about the absolute worst, most intensely infuriating part of this entire heartbreaking equation. your highly visible, deeply untalented, profoundly confident coworker. Let us just collectively call this deeply offensive person the golden child. Every single miserable office environment on the entire planet has a golden child. This is a person who fundamentally possesses the intellectual depth of a completely dry, incredibly shallow parking lot puddle, and the actual, highly measurable work ethic of a deeply sedated, entirely unmotivated sloth. They fiercely spend absolutely 85% of their business day loudly, aggressively socializing in the terribly tiny break room, vigorously networking with upper management by forcefully discussing their incredibly expensive golf clubs, and casually scrolling through entirely unrelated social media feeds on their highly expensive secondary monitor. They absolutely do not know how to run a basic, highly essential pivot table. They confidently do not know where the highly important marketing strategy files are actively located on the server. They actively, undeniably, contribute absolutely nothing of tangible, measurable value to the daily, highly complex operation of the business. But what they do possess in massive, highly abundant quantities, according to the deeply flawed, entirely psychotic logic of modern human resources, is executive presence. Executive presence. Two entirely meaningless, totally fabricated words violently slapped together to legally justify promoting the exact person who laughs the absolute loudest at the regional director's deeply unfunny, incredibly awkward anecdotes. Let us strictly move forward to the exact, excruciatingly painful moment that completely and utterly breaks your deeply exhausted spirit forever. The highly anticipated, completely terrifying, entirely miserable end-of-year strategic revenue restructuring project. Management heavily knows this massive project is an absolute, deeply complicated nightmare. So, naturally, they absolutely do not give it to the golden child to actually execute. They forcefully dump it directly onto your highly exhausted desk. But they officially assign the golden child as the executive project manager, simply to provide crucial strategic direction. Strategic direction. That is completely fabricated corporate code for sending you exactly one poorly punctuated email a week, while they actively leave the office at exactly 3:15 p.m. You, on the other hand, actively spend exactly 6 agonizing, deeply terrifying weeks permanently locked in your deeply depressing cubicle. You meticulously build a 120-page slide deck that is an absolute, undeniable masterpiece. You miraculously fix the terribly broken pivot tables. You flawlessly design every single highly detailed graph. And you actively do it all because you fiercely believe this is your absolute golden ticket completely out of the intensely invisible operational trenches. Then, the massive, highly stressful day of the executive presentation actively arrives. You are sitting completely silently in the absolute back row of the deeply freezing, highly sterile executive boardroom. And who exactly is standing at the absolute front of the room, confidently holding the highly expensive laser pointer? It is absolutely not you. It is the deeply untalented, entirely useless golden child. They are actively presenting your entirely flawless, highly complex work as if they personally crafted every single brilliant, completely perfect slide. They are casually flipping through the highly detailed financial models that you aggressively cried over at exactly 2 a.m. on a completely miserable Sunday morning. And they are heavily using completely meaningless buzzwords to confidently explain them. They literally point at a highly complex algorithmic projection and confidently call it a synergistic paradigm shift. That does not even remotely mean anything. But the absolutely terrifying part is that the executive board members are actively nodding. They are deeply impressed. You forcefully sit there in the terribly uncomfortable leather chair, completely invisible, entirely suffocating in your own massive silence, forcefully biting your tongue so hard you can physically taste iron. It is in this exact, deeply cold, entirely heartbreaking moment that the massive, suffocating illusion permanently shatters. The absolute psychological snap violently echoes through your entire fragile nervous system. You deeply realize with entirely terrifying clarity that your highly exceptional competence did not actually make you a valuable leader. It strictly made you an entirely irreplaceable workhorse. You finally understand the absolute darkest secret of the entire corporate machine. Management will never, ever actively promote the most fiercely hardworking person in the trenches. Why? Because if they actually promote you, who is going to aggressively, perfectly pull the incredibly heavy plow? They absolutely need you to strictly stay completely invisible, highly underpaid, and fiercely reliable. Your massive reward for doing entirely flawless work is simply being aggressively punished with exponentially more deeply terrifying work, while the completely useless golden child confidently floats to the absolute top of the corporate hierarchy purely on a massive cloud of sheer charisma and entirely unearned audacity. So, strictly stop giving your entirely irreplaceable human life to a completely soulless corporate entity that actively refuses to visibly see you. If you have ever entirely poured your deeply fragile soul into a massively difficult project only to violently watch a completely useless golden child forcefully steal all the prestigious credit, fiercely hit the like button right now. Subscribe to the completely cynical channel so we can proudly continue to actively bond over our totally justified workplace rage. And please, strongly drop a highly detailed comment below entirely explaining the exact moment you fully realized you were the completely invisible corporate workhorse. Alright, I genuinely must go now. My totally oblivious manager just aggressively messaged me asking if I actively know how to confidently convert a basic document into a PDF file. And I deeply need to go pretend I am completely, entirely technologically illiterate. Stay highly invisible, fiercely guard your completely precious peace, entirely trust absolutely no one, and I will strictly see you in the next one.